with pleasure. My name is Lucas Carlos Lima. I'm a professor of public international law at the Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais in Brazil. And my current research topic, I always studied international courts and tribunals, but my current research topic is the use of customary international law before and the use code norms before the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. Thank you for the question. I think that it's one of the most necessary rules at international level. If you consider historically, the codification of multilateral treaties is a quite recent phenomenon in international law. Usually, customary rules govern the activity and the life of states. Customary international law is usually applied by national courts, by Supreme Courts also, and you can see that our rules of international law can develop within national legal systems through customary international law. So customary international law is important because it regulates those fields of international law which treaty law does not regulate, and also those fields that do not have a complete adherence of the states of international community. So, for instance, the International Convention for the Law of the Sea has almost universal adherence, but there are some states that are not part of it, which does not mean that it's not there. For those states, there are no rules relating to the law of the sea. Usually, they follow the customary rules governing the field. To your first question, how customary international law is identified, this is not an easy topic. The International Law Commission in 2012 started to study the topic, and in 2018, it arrives to some conclusions, some techniques that international courts and also national courts use to identify customary international law. The rule of thumb, the common approach is defined by Article 38 of the Statute of the International Court of Justice, the custom being general practice accepted as law, usus plus opinio juris, the conviction that some rules. However, this is something that is on the paper because international courts and tribunals identify in international law relying on several techniques, relying on different legal materials that can demonstrate that a certain practice amounting to opinio juris is identified. So there are different ways to identify customary international law, but usually the rule of thumb is to rely on practice and opinio juris. In recent years, we can see that the customary rules have been invoked and used more by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, especially in its advisory function. The Inter-American Court of Human Rights felt the need to identify rules connected to the main rights and obligations present in the American Convention, and the court has made pronouncements not only in traditional fields such as international responsibility, but also humanitarian law, environmental law, refugee and asylum law. So there are a huge range of cases in which the Inter-American Court was called to make a pronouncement on customary international law, especially in a recent advisory opinion, the advisory opinion 26/2020, in which the court had to identify the obligations remaining to those states that leave the withdraw from the American Convention on Human Rights and the OAS Charter. And the conclusion of the court is that the states that leave are still bound by customary international law, especially those provisions that correspond to the American Convention. So even for those states living, there are a bunch of rules from a customary origin that are still obligating states of the region. I believe that regional customary rules, they are not being taken into account as they should be. I think that there are good practices. I think that there is a certain amount of opinion juris, either in Latin America or in Europe or in Asia, or even in America in general, that are already there, but there are no courts or tribunal paying attention to them. I think that these rules should be stressed because they demonstrate a specific need or a specific application or interpretation of a specific part of the law recognized in these regions. There are two recent advisory opinions from the Inter-American Court of Human Rights in which the court ruled out a possibility of the right to a diplomatic asylum corresponds to a customary international rule, regional customary international rule, or even the rule of indefinite presidential re-election as a regional customary international rule. I'm not saying that the court was wrong. Who am I to say something like this? That the court was wrong in saying that these rules were not there. But the court misses the opportunity to say, looking at the practice and opinion juries of the states of the region, what are the rules that are already governing the region, and even if they do not correspond to general rules of international law. So I think that customary rules, or at least regional approaches to certain rules, should be more taken into account by international courts and tribunals, but also by the states, by the codifying organs, and so on and so forth. Jus cogens is an important instrument in the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. The court has declared at least 8 rules that have already correspond jus cogens character. If you look at the advisory opinion 26 that I just mentioned, the court has made a list of jus cogens rules. Not all these rules correspond to the non-exclusive list identified by the International Law Commission on its work on the topic. And I think that the court felt the need to stress other rules or specific rules that have already the peremptory character in the region, because there have been some resistance from governments, from other audiences, and it's important for the court to declare that certain values should be protected without exception, without accepting any kind of derogation. And as we know, we are still developing in international law what are the effects that a certain peremptory rule can possess. We know what Article 53 of the Vienna Convention says on the topic, but I think that we are exploring other avenues and other developments of especially the consequences of declaring a rule as hierarchically superior to other rules. So I think that the Inter-American Court is already aware of this importance, is already declaring certain rules as having peremptory character, and this is important for the development of the international law in the region, also to reinforce certain values that that system needs to protect.